Welcome to Ironbound, a jumper story written by Brian M. Brumbaugh, read by Gwyneth Paltrow. Chapter 1. The last time Brandon Irons saw his mother, she was standing in the courtyard of a crumbling villa outside Florence, bathed in golden light, laughing softly at something he said. She wore a straw hat too big for her head and carried a camera she never used. 2 minutes later, she was gone. No scream, no sound, just gone. Like the air swallowed her whole. He was 12. His father, Brian Iron, didn't cry, didn't ask questions, didn't tear the place apart. He just called it in. A contact at the embassy, a quiet car ride back to the hotel. A single sentence, "We don't talk about this, ever." Brandon didn't understand it then. He thought maybe it was trauma, or fear, or guilt. It wasn't. It was secrecy. Back in the States, things got cold. Not just the winter, the house, the air, his father. A military man turned government contractor turned something else. Brandon never saw files, never heard calls. But he noticed the way neighbors stopped asking questions, the way Brian would disappear for days, then return with a new scar or a tighter jaw. Brandon stopped trying. He went silent, learned to smile at school, fight when pushed, and rid faces like his life depended on it, because eventually it did. He didn't mean to jump the first time. 16 years old, public high school hellscape. One too many meathead jocks decided he was too pretty, too smart, too whatever. Cornered in the parking lot, blood on his lip, knuckles tight. "Let's see if you laugh now, bitch." Brandon closed his eyes and opened them on the roof of the school. Wind, silence, the world below. He nearly fell off from shock alone. The first time you jump is like a seizure, and an orgasm had a baby in your brain while a black hole whispered secrets in your ear. Disorienting, terrifying, addictive. Brandon didn't go home that night, or the next. He tried it again, focused on his bedroom, on the park, on anything he could remember clearly. It worked, and every time, it got easier. By the end of the week, he was sleeping in 3 different motels, raiding gas station ATMs, and leaving 20s taped to windshields of rusted-out sedans. He had power. And for the first time in 4 years, he wasn't afraid. His father didn't look for him. Maybe he didn't care. Maybe he knew. The next year was survival training disguised as rebellion. Brandon figured out how to navigate urban skylines like ghosts walked them. He memorized exit points, built caches of burner phones, passports, cash. He watched rich people, how they moved, what they hoarded, and slowly he started bleeding them dry. Just a little. A corrupt mayor's illegal campaign fund vanished from a vault in New Orleans and showed up as a series of anonymous donations to storm relief in Baton Rouge. A hedge fund titan's coke-fueled yacht party got interrupted by a flashbang grenade, followed by the mysterious loss of $3.2 million in crypto, redistributed to 418 single mothers across Detroit via PayPal. The tabloids spun stories about the telephantom and the jumping jackass. Brandon preferred the quiet, the shadows, the work. He was 18 when he pulled his first high-value art lift, a Klimt locked behind infrared grids in a billionaire's Paris apartment. He didn't keep it. He sold it to a black market broker and used the cash to fund food trucks in 3 cities. But he did keep the frame, hung it in a Moroccan flat he used as a base. Empty frame, no painting. He liked the reminder. At 19, he slept with the Saudi princess in Venice and bailed mid-morning by jumping naked off the balcony into a hotel suite in Barcelona. At 20, he was running 10 jobs a month, 3 aliases, and sleeping with whoever didn't ask too many questions. He smiled a lot, but the frame stayed empty. Somewhere in D.C., 6 floors underground, Brian Iron reviewed satellite traces of anomalous energy spikes. He ran old security cam footage from Venice, Dubai, Berlin. He stared at the face frozen on screen, brash, cocky, stupidly charming, and he said one word, "Brandon." His voice didn't crack, but his hands did curl into fists. Chapter 2. Brandon Iron was 20 years old now, but the world already told ghost stories about him. They said he walked through vaults like air, that he could vanish between one breath and the next, that if you stole from the poor, your bank account might wake up empty, and if you ever saw his face, he'd already seen yours. They weren't entirely wrong. He operated like a magician with a grudge. Step 1, surveillance. Step 2, recon jumps, quick, surgical. Step 3, score, split, and vanish before anyone even figured out the question. His jump range expanded with memory. If he'd seen a place once, really seen it, he could be there in a heartbeat. By 20, he had 87 confirmed jump points on 6 continents. Some were lavish, some were squalid, all were his. The world was his chessboard, he just played fast. Paris, France, 11:45 p.m. The gala at the Palais Garnier glittered with the kind of wealth that required apologies to humanity. Real estate developers, oil magnates, ex-dictators with fresh passports. Brandon arrived in a tailored white tux and no invitation. He smiled at the cameras. They'd never trace the face. He'd erase it from every angle on his way out. The target? Henri Duchamp. Human trafficker disguised as a philanthropist. Kept a vault of blackmail files beneath his wine cellar. Real paper, hard copy, no cloud. Brandon danced with Henri's wife, whispered something that made her laugh, slipped away at midnight, jumped once through the master suite, disabled the fail-safe laser array, cracked the vault using his own pulse-mimicking device, and lit the entire stash on fire. Not just the files, the wine, the carpet, the air. 1 hour later, 50 women in Romania received bank transfers large enough to change their lives. Brandon walked barefoot through the ashes, pocketed a coin from the flames, jumped to Morocco. He kept trophies, one small item per job, a bullet, a locket, a security pass, never anything valuable, just truth. Each object went in a box beneath his bed, stacked high in a hidden compound outside of Marrakesh. He didn't sleep there much, but it was the only place that felt like his. He never stayed long, that was the rule. A week in Tokyo, a few days in Sydney, one long, decadent month in Buenos Aires, where he nearly got soft, lounging in silk sheets, sipping Argentinian wine and juggling lovers like fire. But it always came back to the work. He didn't like the idea of being comfortable, not while there were kids begging outside closed hospitals, not while billionaires built rockets to nowhere. London, 2 a.m. Brandon broke into a corporate skyrise to reroute pension fraud settlements from fake shell companies into real retirement accounts. On his way out, he left a hand-scrawled note on the CEO's desk. Your debt has been paid. Try honesty for once. B. The CEO died of a heart attack 3 weeks later. Brandon didn't feel bad. Intercepts. The jumper commission watched in silence. Brian Iron watched in rage. He knew it was his son. Had known for months. The jump signatures were too familiar. The method too sharp. But this wasn't about family anymore. It was about containment. We've lost track of him again, the text said, eyes glued to a console. Brian didn't speak. He just stared at the red dot blinking on the map. Barcelona, then gone. The silence in the room was heavy. We'll get him, the agent said softly. Brian shook his head. You don't get Brandon, he muttered. You trap him. You lie to him. You wait. He turned to leave, coat already over his shoulders. And then, when the time's right, you rip his goddamn world apart. Brandon didn't see it coming. Not yet. He thought he was untouchable. At 20, he jumped off the Eiffel Tower for fun, dined inside the Pentagon undetected, and slept in the Vatican's secret library for a week before anyone noticed. But something was missing, and not just his mother. He'd never met another jumper, didn't know if they even existed. Maybe that's why he slept around so much, looking for a spark. Something real. He didn't know it yet, but in a few weeks, in a back alley of Marrakesh, dodging bullets and betrayal, he'd meet Stefanie Gold, and everything would change. Chapter 3, Marrakesh, 3:27 a.m. The rooftops were chaos. A dozen men in black tactical gear moved like a hive, their boots slamming tiles and gravel as they tracked the blur ahead of them. Brandon didn't run. He danced, sliding over laundry lines, vaulting low walls, vanishing mid-step and reappearing 10 meters ahead. Jump, land, taunt, repeat. Behind him, the Commission's new anti-jump rifles barked bursts of spatial suppression rounds. Harmless if they missed. Instant paralysis if they didn't. They missed. Until someone else got involved. She hit him like a hurricane. 1 second he was mid-jump. The next, he was flat on his back with a knee on his chest, a blade at his throat, and eyes like green fire burning into his skull. "You're sloppy," she hissed. "You're heavy," he muttered, grinning. She didn't laugh. She jumped and took him with her. They landed in a crumbling spice shop 2 districts away, dust rising like smoke around them. Brandon rolled, coughing. "What the hell?" She kicked him in the ribs. Not hard, just enough to get his attention. "They were mine," she said. "Commission team. You led them straight into my trap." Brandon blinked. Wait, you're a jumper," she said, obviously. "Now shut up. They'll regroup." She turned, grabbing a duffel bag from under a false floor. Weapons, maps, an old photo of someone who looked like her, probably dead. Brandon stood, brushing himself off. "Name?" She hesitated. Stefanie Gold." He smirked. "I'm Brandon. I know who you are, dumbass." They didn't trust each other, not yet, but trust was overrated when you were cornered. Survival came first, escape second, flirtation third, but rising fast. 2 hours later, safe house near the Atlas Mountains. They collapsed onto a moth-bitten couch, soaked in sweat and adrenaline. Stefanie was the first to speak. "You ever work with another jumper before?" "Never met one," Brandon said. "Didn't know we could exist in the same zip code without imploding." She snorted. "There's more of us, scattered, quiet, smart enough to stay that way, and yet here you are making headlines." She shrugged. "I got tired of hiding, tired of watching bastards like the Commission play God." "So you play Robin Hood?" "I play to win," she said, leaning forward. "I like that," he replied, his voice low. The silence was charged now, the kind that crackles just before lightning strikes. Stefanie leaned in. "You're not as clever as you think," Brandon smiled. "I've got other redeeming qualities. Prove it." And just like that, the air snapped. Her hands were in his hair. His lips found her neck. It wasn't soft. It was fire and pressure, clothes torn and breath stolen. No slow undressing, no romantic build-up. They were 2 predators who'd found a reason to pause the hunt. She pinned him to the wall. He spun her onto the bed, jumped mid-kiss, and landed with her astride him in another room entirely. A trickle of laughter, a gasp, and then, "Stop showing off," she whispered. "Can't help it. They didn't sleep much." And when they did, it was tangled in each other, beneath a cracked ceiling, and the scent of gun oil and cinnamon still hanging in the air. The next morning, Brandon sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her. This was different. He didn't want to leave. "You know," she said, stretching like a cat, "I've got plans. Big ones." Brandon raised an eyebrow. "Plans that involve partners? Only if they keep up." He kissed her shoulder. "Just try and lose me." Chapter 4. Berlin, 10:23 p.m. The rain came down like it was trying to erase the city. Brandon watched it from a rooftop 4 stories up, kneeling beside a rusted ventilation shaft, the glow of a stolen burner phone casting his face in blue. Stefanie was 20 clicks away, infiltrating a satellite uplink site. Brandon was the distraction. He didn't mind. He'd gotten good at pretending to be bait. But tonight felt wrong. The air was too still. The static in his skin, the one he'd learned to trust, to jump by, itched like a bad memory. His calm clicked to life. 3 inbound, non-lethals on the roof. "Move now or jump blind," Stefanie's voice said. He exhaled, closed the phone, and stood. Copy. But he didn't jump. He walked to the edge instead. And there he was, standing in the alley below. No gun, no backup. Just a man in a black coat with silver hair and eyes like a glacier mid-murder. Brandon knew that face. Brian Iron, his father. He didn't jump down. He dropped. 4 stories, feet first, landing with a crack of concrete that spiderwebbed beneath his boots. Brian didn't flinch. "Hello, son," Brandon didn't reply. The rain soaked them both, washing away the city's noise. The silence between them was a vacuum. "You always land like that?" Brian asked. "Dramatic entrances, broken pavement?" "I take after my dad," Brandon said. "At least the parts that aren't gutless." A flicker. Barely. Brian gave the faintest smirk. "Still think you're the hero in this story?" Brandon stepped forward. "I'm not a hero. I just don't burn villages for sport." Brian's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Brandon?" he asked. "Money? Redemption? Mommy back?" The word hit like a backhand. Brandon didn't flinch. But inside, something broke. "Why'd you let her vanish?" he asked. Brian was quiet. His voice dropped an octave. You think I let her? Brandon stepped closer. You didn't look. You didn't scream. You just left. That was the first clue. She didn't vanish, Brian said. She jumped. The words landed like thunder. Brandon's mind raced. What? Your mother was a jumper, one of the first. We were ordered to bring her in. I married her to keep her out of containment. Brandon's breath caught. Brian kept going. She disappeared that day in Florence because she was running. Not from you, from the people who found out what she was. You're lying, am I? Brian pulled something from his coat. A photo, old, tattered, a surveillance shot. His mother, standing in a crowd, 10 years older, alive. We traced her to Ankara 3 years after she vanished. She didn't want to be found. Brandon stared at it like it might combust. You're just trying to throw me off, he muttered. Confuse me. I'm trying to make you see that you're not the first, and you won't be the last. The commission isn't the villain, we're the leash. Brandon's fists clenched. You're the cage. Without us, the world burns. Jumpers don't stay Robin Hood for long. Power eats people alive. Maybe you just weren't strong enough to stop it. Brian stepped in close, nose to nose. You think love will save you? That girl you're running with, Stefanie? I give it 2 years before she outgrows you or turns you in. Brandon didn't hit him. He just vanished. He landed in a cold sweat, inside a dim motel in Vienna they used as a fallback point. Stefanie was already there, bruised but breathing, reassembling gear. She looked up. You okay? Brandon didn't answer. He walked past her into the bathroom, stared at himself in the mirror, eyes like his father's, and a photo burning a hole in his pocket. Chapter 5. Vienna, 2:44 a.m. The city slept under fog, its ancient bones humming with electric whispers. Vienna wore history like armor, ornate facades, underground vaults, stone shadows that remembered secrets. Brandon and Stefanie moved like ghosts. Not the superhero kind, the real kind. The quiet, calculated kind that haunt from the corners of your eye. You feel them before you see them. And when you see them, it's too late. Vaults beneath the embassy, Stefanie whispered, crouched beside Brandon behind a dumpster slick with rain. That's 3 layers of motion sensors, 2 thermal grids, and a 70-year-old wall that thinks it's still in the Cold War, Brandon muttered. She smirked. Good. I hate easy. They were targeting a commissioned satellite uplink node hidden in an Austrian diplomatic embassy. A real quiet op. No headlines. No boom. Just a server farm full of tracking data. Hundreds of active jumper signatures, including Stefanie's. If they pulled it off, they'd burn the commission's global map blind for weeks. The OP required 5 jumps, 15-second timing windows, and a solid dose of improvised brilliance. Brandon carried a micro-EMP grenade. Stefanie wore a stealth mesh cloak modified to scramble motion detection. They didn't bring guns. Guns were loud. Guns got you killed. Inside, sub-level 3. The first jump was clean. A maintenance closet they'd scoped a month earlier. Stefanie went first, then waved Brandon forward. They moved like ink through cracks, slipping past cameras by syncing with their pan-cycle blind spots. Brandon used the sound of nearby plumbing to mask their movements, timing steps with water hammer bursts and pressure valve shrieks. They reached the server room in 13 minutes flat. Brandon knelt beside the access panel. Cover me, you've got 2 minutes. I only need... The lights turned red. 3, he finished, sighing. Ambush. The first agent didn't come through a door. He dropped from the ceiling vent, razor wire in both hands. Stefanie reacted faster than instinct. She jumped mid-dodge, reappearing behind the agent and cracking his skull with a telescoping baton. They knew, she hissed. They baited us, Brandon said, yanking wires from the panel and slapping the EMP grenade into the drive rack. How much time? 6 seconds until boom, 4 seconds until we're surrounded. They didn't jump, they sank into the floor. Jumping straight down 3 stories into Vienna's sewer grid isn't fun. It's loud, blind, and smells like defeat and dead things. But it's better than dying. Barely. They landed hard, Brandon twisting his ankle, Stefanie slamming shoulder first into a wet brick wall. They didn't scream, didn't even curse, just ran, the escape. They navigated by memory and bad lighting. Brandon gripped a glowing tracker he'd lifted from the agent's belt, A commission-issued signature tag. He tossed it into a tunnel with a decaying pipe and grinned. Let them chase ghosts. Stefanie didn't smile. Her face was pale, mouth drawn. They baited us with my signature, she said. How long have they been tracking me? Since before we met, Brandon guessed. Why not you? Maybe they're not after me, he said. Maybe they're after both of us. Together. A silence settled. That kind that makes you question every shared moment. Every night. Every kiss. Safe house, 4:07 a.m. They returned to a backup bolt hole in Budapest. Low ceilings, dim lights, fake passports stacked like poker chips. Stefanie stripped her soaked jacket and sat against the wall. She didn't speak for a long time. You think I'm compromised? She asked finally. Brandon didn't answer immediately. He crossed the room, knelt beside her, took her hand. I think we've got less time than we thought. That's it? She stared into him. If I ever go dark, if they turn me, would you kill me? He didn't flinch. No. Then you're a fool. No, Brandon said. I'd die trying to save you. That's worse. Stefanie stared at him. Something in her eyes cracked, like she'd been holding her breath for 5 years and finally exhaled. No quip, no deflection, just silence, thick with heat and memory. She leaned forward slowly, hand brushing against his chest like she wasn't sure if he was real. You're the only thing in this world that makes me want to stop running, she whispered. Brandon didn't say anything. He just kissed her. Not like the last time, wild and hungry and desperate. This was slower, deeper, like he was memorizing her mouth in case she vanished tomorrow. Her hands gripped his shirt, pulled him closer. He lifted her gently, backing toward the bed they hadn't touched in days, too busy surviving to remember they were still human. Clothes came off like confessions. Every scar revealed was a story. Every breath a promise. They didn't rush. They took their time, like two people who'd been stolen from the world and finally found a piece of it they didn't want to give back. The bed creaked. The night held its breath. And in the space between shadows they made something quiet and sacred, something that couldn't be tracked or tagged or stolen. Later, her head rested on his chest. His fingers traced invisible patterns along her spine. Still think I'm a fool? He asked. She kissed his shoulder. Yeah, she murmured. But you're my fool. They didn't sleep. They planned, mapped, countermapped, slept in shifts when they could pull themselves apart. The game had changed. The commission wasn't reacting anymore. They were hunting. And now, Stefanie wasn't just marked. She was his. Chapter 6. Zurich, 8:19 p.m. They should have known it was a trap. The intel came too clean. A whistleblower from inside the commission. A burner line left at one of their dead drops. A single name. Elena Iron. Status active. His mother. Brandon stared at the photo for 12 minutes straight. Stefanie said nothing, just watched him process it. It wasn't the same photo his father had shown him in Berlin. This one was new, recent. Facial recognition dated it to 5 months ago. Buenos Aires. Same eyes, same smile, same ghost. It's bait, Stefanie said finally. Maybe it's a damn noose, Brandon, and I'm already in it, he muttered. They tracked the source to an old opera house in Zurich, long condemned, buried beneath scaffolding and bureaucratic decay. Brandon insisted on going alone. Stefanie didn't argue. She just slipped a knife into his coat and kissed him like she might not get another chance. Zurich, 11:11 p.m., inside. The building smelled of dust and cold marble, no power, no sound. Just moonlight bleeding through shattered glass and the faint echo of steps not yet taken. Brandon moved slow, every sense on fire, and then she stepped out of the shadows. Hello, Brandon. She looked exactly like he remembered, not a day older than when she disappeared. Same voice, same warmth. The scent of jasmine and sandalwood from a memory he'd locked behind pain. Mom? He whispered. I've missed you, she said, stepping forward. He didn't move. She reached for his hand, and that's when he saw it, a faint shimmer, a stutter at the edge of her outline. Projection, he growled. Sorry, son. Brian Iron stepped out from the wings. Brandon froze. You son of a... The tranquilizer dart hit him in the neck before he finished the sentence. Time unknown, black site 7. Brandon woke to restraints, pulse pounding like war drums in his ears. The room was white, sterile, no doors, no windows. Just his father, sitting in a chair like he was waiting for a barber appointment. "You never used to cry," Brian said calmly. "Not even as a baby." Brandon tried to jump. Nothing. Brian held up a small black box. "Spatial inhibitor. Clips the neural impulse just before the jump reflex hits. Nasty, huh?" "Let me guess," Brandon coughed. "You're here to save me?" Brian stood slowly, walked to the edge of the table. "You have two options. Work with us or disappear." "Already working with someone," Brandon said. "She's smarter than you. Hotter, too. She's tagged." Brandon's eyes snapped open. "Yeah," Brian said. "We let her get away. We wanted her to lead us to the core safe houses, which she did." "You're welcome." The silence between them was volcanic. "Why?" Brandon asked. "Why her? Why me?" Brian didn't flinch. "Because power has a half-life, and yours is ticking down. We've seen what jumpers become. Sociopaths. Tyrants. Or corpses." Brandon snarled. "You mean like Mom?" Brian actually hesitated. "Your mother wasn't a monster," he said quietly. "But she chose them over us. She made her call." "No," Brandon snapped. "You made yours. You let her run. And you've been chasing your guilt ever since." Brian didn't deny it. He just pressed a button. Pain like fire ripped through Brandon's head, every neuron screaming. He blacked out. 6 hours later, she was here to preform a rescue. The wall behind him shattered. Stefanie landed in a crouch, coat smoking from gunfire, eyes blazing. "Get up," she said. Brandon tried. She yanked the inhibitor off his neck, and the second it disengaged, he jumped. They reappeared on a frozen mountainside above Lucerne, tumbling into the snow, both gasping for air. "You okay?" she asked, half panicked. Brandon didn't answer. He just held her face in his hands, pressed his forehead to hers. "They used her," he whispered. "They used my mother to trap me." "Then we hit back," Stefanie growled. "Not just hit back," Brandon said. "We burned them to the goddamn ground." And just like that, the gloves were off. Chapter 7. Location: Black Site -3 Neural Hub, Greenland Ice Shelf, 1:03 a.m. Wind howled across the frozen expanse like a banshee chained to the sky. The entrance to Black Site -3 wasn't marked. No flags, no lights. Just a glacial fissure and 3 feet of snow over a reinforced hatch that didn't exist on any satellite scan. Stefanie Gold had been planning this since Zurich. Now she was ready. She stood atop the ridge, masked in thermal camo, body still as stone. 2 clicks out, sensor drones pinged the area. 3 cycles, all clear. They didn't see her. They didn't see the 24 jump anchors she'd planted in the last 2 days, strategic fallback points, stashed weapons, and trap kills. She wasn't here to run. She was here to clean house. Inside, neural surveillance core. Black Site 3 was the Commission's nerve center. The neural cortex array stored live and predictive movement models on over 160 known or suspected jumpers. You didn't just erase a hard drive here. You rewrote global defense protocol. So she didn't come to erase it. She came to detonate it from inside. She jumped into sub-level 2, bypassing every guard checkpoint. First 3 agents didn't even see her. They dropped mid-step, one after another, arteries slashed, eyes wide with surprise. No noise. No warning. Just efficient, elegant violence. Her blade didn't shake. Her breath didn't quicken. She wasn't angry anymore. She was focused. A lone operator saw her reflection in a screen too late. She jumped into him, reappeared behind him mid-sentence and slammed his head into the console hard enough to crack bone. "Too slow," she muttered. "Command deck, 111 am." The heart of the system hummed. 6 monolithic servers arranged in a hexagon, cables running like veins into the walls. A rotating guard shift of 12. All armed, all trained. She gave them 6 seconds. Jumped, disarmed 2 mid-turn, shot 3 with their own sidearms, jumped again, tossed a live flashbang mid-teleport, reappeared on the far end of the room as the blast blinded the rest. Her gun was empty. That was fine. So were their lungs after she hit the emergency decompression lever. 2 guards tried to seal the vault. She jumped between them with surgical precision and introduced them to the floor via skull. Then she exhaled. The room was hers. She approached the neural core. "Access code?" the system asked, blinking red. She held up a severed wrist from the dead commander and pressed it to the ID pad. "Verified. Initiate shutdown sequence?" the AI asked. She smiled. "No," Stefanie whispered. "Initiate infection." She pulled a chip from her vest. One Brandon had been modifying for years. A polymorphic AI virus designed to corrupt predictive logic trees, reroute surveillance, scramble live target indexing. In human terms, the Commission wouldn't be able to track a sneeze in a wind tunnel for at least 6 months. She jammed it in. Lights went out. Exit 1:19 a.m. Alarms wailed. She didn't run. She walked. Calm, slow, measured, jumped when she had to, killed when she didn't. By the time the backup teams arrived, Black Site 3 was a tomb. Not a firefight, not a siege, a surgical deletion. Her message was scrawled on the main screen in red code. "We are not your weapons. G. 20 minutes later, Northern Finland, Safe House Echo." Brandon was waiting by the fire, half asleep. She stepped in silently, dropped her blade on the table, and collapsed beside him. He looked at her, bruised and snow-dusted, and said nothing, just pulled her into his arms. She leaned into him. "It's done," she whispered. "You okay?" "No, but they're worse." He kissed her forehead. "Let's make them hurt." Chapter 8. Location, Geneva, Switzerland, 1,200 meters below sea level. Codename, the Cradle. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it was the largest sovereign wealth aggregation site on Earth. A hyper-secure vault of quantum-encrypted currencies, off-grid data stores, and physical bullion. Every major global bank, regime, and corporation had fingers in this pot. It wasn't just money. It was leverage. And Brandon Iron was about to steal all of it. Pre-AP, 10 days earlier, Reykjavik. The table was littered with blueprints, surveillance photos, and blinking holomaps stitched together by Voss. A custom AI Stefanie coded off a stolen commission neural frame. Brandon stood over the schematic with a coffee in one hand and an apple in the other, chewing like he wasn't planning global economic war. "We can't take everything," Stefanie said, fingers flying across her tablet. "I don't want everything," Brandon replied. "I want just enough to break the spine." They weren't robbing the vault for riches. They were hijacking control. They'd redistribute $4.6 trillion in slush, shadow, and unallocated reserves to 5,002 digital wallets across the globe, one for every major slum, collapsed community, and underserved zone. The poor would wake up powerful, the rich would wake up pissed. Jump tech prep. The AP required INANT 112 jump anchors in 8 countries, and then 3 quantum crossover points to bypass firewalled spatial locks. When 7 misdirection jumps to confuse heat tracking systems, a singular 44-second window when the cradle rotated into blackout alignment. Failure meant vaporization. Success meant revolution. Simple, Brandon muttered. Psychotic, Stefanie corrected. He grinned. Potato, potato, the day of. T-044, Iceland. Jump. Stefanie appears in a drone relay tower and implants a ghost signal, a fake signature loop to mimic a Russian hack op. NATO and the Commission scramble. T-037, Johannesburg. Brandon jumps into a telecom relay hub and reroutes satellite lag time for cradle surveillance. Now they've got 2.5 seconds of visual blackout every 18 seconds. He jumps out mid-step. T-025, Dubai. Both of them land in the penthouse of an arms dealer funding Commission black sites. They leave his servers in flames and wipe the metadata trail of their upcoming jumps. "One more loose end gone," Stefanie whispers. T-014, Cradle Outer Rim Access Node. Brandon breathes deep. His hands twitch. "You ready?" he asks. "I was born ready," Stefanie says, setting a temporal anchor beneath the panel. They jump, together, the vault, interior. They appear in a ventilation tunnel the size of a shipping container. Silent, zero margin for error. Below them, rows of armored servers encased in carbon shielding, guarded by automated drones and cold-faced humans with enough hardware to kill a country. Stefanie slides a blade between 2 magnetic seals. Sparks dance. She taps a detonator into place, microscopic, shaped like a fingernail. Brandon synchronizes the countdown with Voss. 4 seconds after detonation, he says. We jump to the cold chamber. Unless you screw up the timing. I never screw up. You're wearing mismatched socks. He grins. Distraction tactic. Boom. The seal cracks. Steam vents. Alarms flare. They jump straight through the blast, reappearing in the heart of the vault. The cold chamber. Temperature, minus 82 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric control, manual override only. They have 30 seconds before they pass out. Voss activates. Brandon taps his implant. Execute flood. Across the globe, 5,002 ghost wallets blink to life. Numbers surge. The redistribution begins. Billions vanish from hoarded pools and reappear in digital hands of the forgotten. Slums light up with notification chimes. Rural schools get lifetime budgets in a blink. The vault screams. The system frays. T-0. Brandon grabs Stefanie's hand. Last jump. You sure? You trust me? Always. They jump. And they're gone. The cradle locks down. But there's nothing left to protect. 24 hours later. Unknown location. Sunlight pours through a window above a quiet coastal cafe. Brandon sips wine. Stefanie leans against his shoulder, laughing at a newspaper headline. Global wealth glitch. Billionaires panic as fortunes vanish. U.S. Treasury denies digital robbery. World Bank claims data corruption. Glitch, Brandon mutters. Cute? Think they'll come after us? Stefanie asks. He shrugs. Let them try. They toast. Chapter 9. Location, Lofoten Islands, Norway. Dusk. It was quiet. The kind of quiet you only get at the edge of the world, where the sea meets the sky and time forgets how to move. The small cabin overlooked jagged cliffs and endless blue. Wind rattled the shutters, but inside, stillness. Brandon Irons stood alone. Stefanie was gone, on a supply run or giving him space. He didn't ask. He needed to breathe. He hadn't slept in days. Not since the cradle. Not since the headlines. Not since he realized. He wasn't sure what came next. The fire crackled, wood split, and then a voice broke the silence. You always hated the cold. Brandon didn't turn. You always hated losing. Brian Irons stepped through the door like he owned the world. No weapons, no gear. Just the same black coat dusted with salt and snow. Brandon poured a drink. Took you longer than I thought. Wasn't hard to find you. You're not hiding anymore. I'm not running either. Good, Brian said, because I didn't come to fight. They sat across from each other, no table, just flame between them. The silence was thicker than blood. You know what I'm going to ask, Brandon said. Brian nodded. Why? Brandon's voice cracked. Why did you let her go? Why did you become this? Brian didn't blink. Because I didn't know how to save her. Or you. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped like they were shaking from memory. Your mother jumped one night while you were sleeping. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. She left me a note. He reached into his coat and pulled it out, creased, worn, fragile. Brandon took it with shaking hands. They'll come for you if I stay. They'll come for him. I won't let them. Love him enough for both of us. I'm sorry. Elena. Brandon stared at the paper. His vision blurred. She didn't abandon me, he whispered. She was protecting us. Brian nodded slowly. I hated her for it, for a long time. Then I hated you, because you had her eyes, her gift, her freedom. So you hunted me? No, Brian said. I watched you. I lied to my own people to keep them off your trail until I couldn't anymore. Until you became too big to hide? Brandon dropped the note into the fire, watched it curl and vanish. You still came to the cabin in Zurich, he said. Still tricked me, tortured me. Brian looked away. I didn't know what else to do. I thought, if I could break you, maybe you'd stop. Maybe you'd come back. You were never trying to stop me, Brandon said, voice low. You were trying to break yourself before I did it for you. Brian didn't deny it. So now what? Brandon asked. You gonna drag me in for sentencing, be the hero again? No, Brian said. I'm here to say goodbye. You quitting? Brian reached into his coat one last time, pulled out a flash drive. This has names, locations, safe houses, leverage, Everything the commission didn't want you to know. I leaked it. Burned every bridge I had. I'm done. Brandon didn't take it. Not yet. Why now? Brian looked up and, for the first time, Brandon saw the man, not the hunter. Because I finally believe in what you're doing. Because you proved me wrong. Because your mother would have followed you. And I didn't. They sat there. The air between them wasn't healed, but it wasn't broken either. It was real. Brandon finally took the drive. You disappear after this? Brian smiled faintly. That's the plan. Where will you go? Somewhere cold, he said. Somewhere quiet. Brandon stood, walked to the door. Don't come back, he said. I won't, but if you do. He paused. Don't knock. Just walk in. We'll leave a fire going. Brian left without another word. The door closed behind him. And Brandon, son of a ghost, breaker of systems, leader of none, felt something twist loose in his chest. Not pain, not grief, just weight gone. Later that night, Stefanie returned, cheeks flushed from the wind, snowflakes tangled in her hair. She looked tired, beautiful, alive. Brandon met her at the door, pulled her into his arms, held her like she was the only thing tethering him to the planet. It's almost time, he said quietly, lips near her ear. She smiled faintly. Then let's disappear. He cut her off, eyes burning into hers. But not till after I make love to you. She didn't speak. She just kissed him. They moved through the cabin like a memory, slow and quiet, fingers slipping beneath zippers and worn fabric, undoing hours, weeks, years of tension. Clothes fell away. The fire danced in the hearth, casting gold over skin and shadows. Brandon traced a line along her spine like it was the only map he trusted. Stefanie cupped his face with both hands and kissed him like a vow, gentle, deep, with the kind of heat that wasn't just physical but earned. There was no urgency now, no noise, just the rhythm of breath and the softness of skin sliding against skin. They made love in the slowest way possible, like they had all the time in the world, even if they knew they didn't. Her legs wrapped around his waist. His hands gripped her hips like she might disappear. She whispered his name. He said nothing, just pressed his forehead to hers and moved in perfect silence. Outside snow blanketed the world, inside they melted. Later, tangled in sheets, her head on his chest, he whispered, This is the only thing I've ever stolen that I'll never give back. She smiled into his skin. Then you're finally a real thief. Chapter 10. Location, Argentina, 11:59 p.m. The house was small, wood and stone built into the cliffs above the surf. No satellites tracked it. No records logged it. Inside, the fire crackled. A record spun something old and soft. The scent of wine and ocean drifted through the open window. Brandon stood barefoot on the porch, wind tugging at his shirt. Stefanie leaned in the doorway, watching him. They're going to come for us, she said softly. Let them, he replied. She crossed to him, slid her arms around his waist, rested her cheek against his back. Do you think they'll find us? Eventually, he said, but not yet. He turned, kissed her slowly. We've got time, he said, enough to live, enough to love, enough to plan. She smiled, then hesitated. There's something else, she said. Yeah? She took his hand, placed it low on her stomach. You're not just planning for two anymore. The wind stopped. The world shifted again. Brandon didn't speak, just pulled her into him, one hand in her hair, the other never leaving her belly. The world would chase them. That was fine. They weren't just running anymore. They were building, elsewhere. In a forgotten underground chamber in Eastern Europe, a machine blinked awake. Its readout flickered with a name. Elena Iron, signal stabilized. Then another. Subject, halo, protocol, status, incomplete. A mechanical voice hummed. New target, Brandon Iron. Location, unknown. Priority, capture and contain. Back in Argentina, Brandon stared at the stars. He didn't know why his chest ached, didn't know what storm was coming, but he felt it, and when it came, he'd be ready. Because some men steal for power, some for revenge, and some steal back the world so their child can live free of it. End of Book 1, Ironbound, to be continued. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more stories written by Brian M. Brumbaugh.